The galaxy burned, and humanity stood at the edge of extinction. The Zalari Dominion, rulers of countless star systems, had declared war on Earth, and it wasn't a war of conquest, it was extermination. Their fleets, vast and unstoppable, reduced human colonies to ash, their technology centuries ahead of anything humanity could field. Every battle was a massacre. Every counterattack was crushed before it began. The United Earth Defense Fleet fought desperately, but conventional warfare was useless. Shields that absorbed entire nuclear barrages, weapons that bypassed armor as if it didn't exist against such overwhelming force, strategy meant nothing. The Zalari saw humanity as nothing more than a nuisance, something to be wiped out and forgotten. The War Council on Earth knew survival was impossible. Humanity had weeks left, maybe days. And so, in their final hours, they turned to something that should never have existed. Project Echo. Even among the highest ranks, few knew what it truly was. A warship. A weapon. A gamble. It had been in development long before the war started, hidden away in the void, far beyond the reach of prying eyes. It was spoken of in whispers, a last resort, a forbidden technology that defied the laws of the universe itself. It wasn't built to fight fairly. It wasn't built to win by force. It was built to break reality. As the final fleets of humanity prepared for their last stand, the order was given. Project Echo was activated. And in that moment, something shifted. A Zalari battle group, poised to annihilate one of the last human strongholds, vanished. Not destroyed. Not defeated. Simply erased. As if it had never been there. Across the Dominion, alarms rang as something impossible unfolded. Fleets disappeared before battles began. Weapons fired at nothing. Soldiers reported seeing human ships where there were none, fighting battles that had already happened or had never happened at all. The Zalari, for the first time in their existence, felt fear. Because the war they had started was no longer one they understood. And on the bridge of the last human dreadnought, the Admiral watched his screens, heart pounding, as the battlefield twisted, as entire armadas flickered in and out of existence. Project Echo had worked. But no one knew how. And no one knew what would happen next. The Zalari had ruled the stars for millennia, their empire built on the ruins of species that dared to resist. They had seen every kind of war, every kind of weapon. But never this. The human warship had no name. No classification. It did not register on scanners. Its dimensions were not fixed, it expanded, contracted, existed in multiple locations at once. It was not seen arriving in battle, it was simply there. And when it was there, reality bent. Zalari warships fired upon it, but their weapons hit nothing. Or hit themselves. Or never fired at all. Time unraveled around it. Admirals ordered retreats before they had even arrived. Entire fleets engaged an enemy that had already won. Survivors tried to describe what they had seen. Their minds fractured under the weight of the impossible. Some screamed that the ship did not move through space but through probability, choosing only to exist in realities where humanity had already triumphed. Others spoke of fighting their own reflections, their own pasts, their own futures. And then there were those who saw nothing at all. Fleets sent to intercept the human warship never returned. No wreckage, no distress calls. Just silence. The Zalari Dominion, for all its might, could not fight what it could not understand. Generals gathered in war rooms, studying battle footage that played differently every time they watched it. Orders were given to destroy the ship at any cost, but how do you kill something that does not exist in a single moment, in a single place? Then came the battle at Vega Prime. The Dominion's largest fleet, 5,000 warships strong, faced the anomaly head-on. It should have been overwhelming. It should have been a massacre. It lasted 7 seconds. Not a shot was fired. The fleet arrived. And then it was gone. Every ship. Every soldier. Every signal. As if they had never been there at all. Across the galaxy, the Zalari lost their will to fight. The war was slipping from their grasp, not through force, but through something worse, uncertainty. They no longer knew what was real. And as their empire trembled, the humans finally spoke. A single transmission, broadcast across every Zalari channel. You should have left us alone. The war was won in every timeline that mattered. The Zalari no longer fought, they fled, surrendered, or simply ceased to exist. But the cost of victory was still being counted. No one truly controlled the ship. It was not commanded, it was unleashed. The few humans who had set foot on it were no longer the same. Some returned speaking in languages that had never existed. Others vanished between seconds, lost in fractures of time. The ship did not obey orders anymore. If it ever had. At first, humanity celebrated. The war was over. The impossible had saved them. But then the questions began. The ship had stopped responding. It remained in orbit over a ruined world, silent. Instruments failed to detect it, yet it cast a shadow against the void. It sent no signals, answered no hails. And then, without warning, it was elsewhere. No engines. No movement. One moment it was above Earth, the next it was light years away, hovering over the ruins of a Zalari capital that had never been attacked. Something was wrong. The scientists who had created it were either missing or unwilling to speak. Those who dared to study its behavior found only paradoxes. Reports arrived from colonies that had never been settled, claiming the ship had been there before it was even built. Distorted transmissions echoed across deep space, human voices, pleading for help, from ships that had never left port. Some argued to destroy it. If it could be destroyed. The war was over, and humanity had won, but at what cost? Had they created a weapon or something worse? Had they bent reality to their will, or had reality simply stopped fighting back? The Zalari were gone, but their final act was not surrender. It was silence. They refused to speak to humans anymore. Entire civilizations that had once been allies now refused to answer calls. Humanity had not just won a war. It had changed something fundamental. And somewhere, in the endless dark, the ship drifted, waiting. The ship made its own decision. One moment, it was there. The next, it wasn't. No explosion. No signal. No trace. Humanity's greatest weapon, its darkest secret, had simply ceased to be. Some believed it had finally broken itself, unraveling under the weight of its own existence. Others whispered that it had never left at all, that it was everywhere, in every possible future, watching. The Zalari Dominion collapsed within days of its disappearance. Their empire, once unshakable, crumbled under the weight of its own fear. Without a war to fight, their leaders turned on each other, blaming the humans, blaming themselves, blaming gods they had never believed in. Within a year, the Zalari were nothing more than a memory. And humanity. The war was over, but peace never came. The galaxy had changed. No species dared to challenge Earth. No envoys arrived. No treaties were signed. Humanity had become something else, not conquerors, not diplomats, but something unknowable. The colonies thrived. The fleet expanded. But the stars were empty. No wars, no alliances. Just silence. Then, decades later, the first anomaly was detected. A distress beacon. A human frequency. A ship that had never been built, calling for help from a sector that did not exist. And in its garbled transmission, one phrase repeated over and over. It never left.